Welcome to Yahoo Finance Presents. My guest is Chirlane McCray. She is New York City's First Lady and Thrive New York City founder. She's been calling attention to the issues of mental health for years now and recently unveiled a white paper on the growing mental health crisis Americans and New Yorkers face in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for inviting me. I'm always happy to speak about mental health.
And that's something that not a lot of people are. And I think that's one of the things that you're really doing is kind of shining a light on this. I think that COVID really laid bare the inequities in our healthcare system. Communities of color have faced disproportionate rates of COVID-19 in terms of mortality and hospitalizations. Is the mental health space any better when it comes to equality?
Oh, no, not at all. I used to talk about the fact that we were in a crisis long ago. Before the pandemic, we were in crisis. We had so many more young people experiencing depression and anxiety. In many parts of our country, there was a rising suicide rate. We were in an opioid epidemic. You don't hear much about that these days, but it hasn't gone away. And of course, there's alcohol abuse. Substance use disorders are probably on the rise. I don't know if people are actually paying attention to that, but the fact that people are isolated and not able to access their support groups is really difficult for folks. So no, mental health has never gotten the attention that it deserves. And I always say we can't separate the mind from the body. And there is no health without mental health. We can't say that just because people aren't dying means that they're healthy. It takes a lot more than that. And we have the ability to direct more attention to this area, and we should, because we're going to be living with the residual effects of this pandemic for a long time.
So the white paper is called The Path Forward. So let's, find out how we make this better. And I do think some of it is awareness, right? Shining a light, telling people it's okay to talk about this because there's a stigma, I think, around mental health. But then it's also being able to fund this. And we all know what's happening to city budgets, not just our own here as New Yorkers, but really around the country. Do we have the resources, or can awareness be enough to make a difference on the path forward?
Well, raising the awareness is important. We have to do that. We have to get rid of the stigma around mental health. We have to let people know that, we all have it, right? It's all part of all of us. It's about being human. We know that 1 in 5 adults has a mental health challenge at any given point of their life, and it's not something to be ashamed of. I can't say it enough times. It's part of being human. We don't get upset if someone develops asthma or diabetes or breaks a leg. Why do we have this shame around depression or anxiety? We do have to change our attitude, and education will go a long way to helping with that. And in terms of funding, I believe that there are many efficiencies that we can bring to bear, and I talk about this in our white paper. If we integrated mental health services with primary care, for example, what a big difference that would make. Not only would people be more likely to access the services they need, but certain populations like older adults, who are very not likely to access mental health services. And I know this from, caring for my own mother when she was sick, when she developed cancer, and from being in our senior centers, that seniors will think about their bodily needs, but they're not very likely to seek out help if they're depressed about why they're sick, or anxious, or for any other reason. They just are not going to do that. But if they were able to access mental health services through their primary care doctor, it would be so much better. That would take away some of that stigma, and it would take away the need to go somewhere else to get that care that they need.
What do you think the role of technology is? Because I think especially for children, and we were talking about this before the pandemic, seeing rise in depression and anxiety, with social media. Here we've basically all been, isolating, but we've had our devices. Is it helping or is it a cause of mental health issues? How do you see it factoring in?
Well, technology is a tool, and I think we always have to remember that. Any tool can be used up to someone's benefit or their detriment. And with our young people, it has been somewhat helpful with remote learning, and certainly for our older adults with teletherapy, telemedicine. I am grateful that we have technology during this pandemic because I think we would all be suffering even more than if we, were without it. So it can be a benefit, but there are also ways that it is not helpful, especially with young children. Young children need other children and other adults in their life to grow, to develop socially, to develop emotionally, and so we can't be overly reliant on it. There are many apps which are useful, but we need, again, we need more. We have to integrate technology into our lives in a way where there's more balance. And I think the federal government actually can do more to make sure that this happens in the right way, in the appropriate way, so that we aren't overly reliant, that there are standards of care that are enforced, and also, I have to throw this out, to make sure people have access to the technology. Right now in New York City, which we can think of as the communications capital of the world, we have more than 500,000 New Yorkers who don't even have broadband. Now, in this day and age, that's like not having electricity or water. And just when you think about a little girl at night going outside a store, standing on the sidewalk to access that store's Wi-Fi to do her homework, right? Or waiting in a parking lot to, get on the Wi-Fi there, it just brings so much sadness to me. I feel so sad about it because it's so unnecessary in this very rich country that we live in.
It also brings back a lot of this has to do with finances in a way, like people having a job that they feel good about, that they feel attached to, that brings them satisfaction. How is that connected to mental health?
Oh, it's very important. Everyone needs something to do, right? We know that as humans, we're social beings, that we need connections to others, and we need something to do with our lives. So we like to feel like we're contributing. And so when that's not possible, when people are, of course, there's economic distress, but there's also, that when the people are not connected to others, that they don't feel they're part of a community, it is very depressing for people. And they can often feel a lack of that willingness to live. And so this pandemic, which has reinforced the, isolation and, too many of us are on, in quarantine or on lockdown, and it's been very difficult for people, especially those who don't have, right? Especially those who cannot connect to people using technology or other means.
So you talk about bringing the federal government in. What about the business community? And look, we all know, like with what's going to be happening with budgets here. I mean, you just read about what's happening with the MTA. I mean, we know that we're going to be in a crunch, and mental health has not been at the top of the list. And to get it up there, we are going to have to figure out probably some creative ways to do it. Is there a role for business in this, either for, not just having it in their offices, but actually for paying for it? Like, do they have some responsibility, especially these big disruptors?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I said earlier, every employer has a responsibility to make sure that their employees are able to stay well. I mean, it costs them if they don't. Has a huge effect on the bottom line. And I'm forgetting the exact number, but I think that one study estimated we lose something like $43 billion in a year because of mental health challenges that people are suffering from. That's a lot of money. And so I think that employers have to rethink their health packages. They have to rethink the environments in which their employees are working, and rethink the way this has been handled in the past. I mean, in that people have been unwilling to even talk about it. We've got to talk about it. We can't be afraid to take it on. I went to visit Kate Spade's offices not too long ago to speak to the employees there, and I was so moved by the hunger of the employees to actually have open conversations about mental health. Now, obviously, because she had taken her own life, people were in a space where they're feeling grief, they're feeling anxiety, they're feeling so many different emotions, and they, part of it was needing to process what they're going through. But a lot of it is also, though, thinking about like themselves and their families and their neighbors and their friends, and this is something that employers can do so much about. I mentioned Thrive in the Workplace. People can call about Thrive or go on the website and learn about Thrive in the Workplace, what kind of materials can be made available to employees. There's a lot of information out there for employers now because they're beginning to understand how much not only it affects the bottom line, but also employee satisfaction, right? As I said before, being healthy is not just about being alive, right? It's about quality of life, and our quality of life has a lot to do with how we're feeling.
So we are both privileged to be able to work at home. We have jobs. So this again, this next question, I'm realizing all of that, but the New York that we know and that we love right now, do you think it's coming back?
Well, I'd like to reframe that question just a little bit because I think that I don't like to think that we're going to go back to quote unquote normal. I like to think that we're going to come back stronger because of this. This pandemic has shown so many of the inequities within our city, within our nation, and we could do better. We could do a whole lot better, and it would be to the benefit of everyone if we did. So I like to think that this is a change moment, that we can look at the cracks and the unseemly side of what is happening right now and say, we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this because we know that when everyone has an opportunity to participate in this economy, to work in a good environment and be happy in the communities where they are, is better for everyone. And so I like to think about us strengthening our communities, strengthening our neighborhoods, and really coming to grips with how we can make things better going forward. Because this is not the last crisis that we will go through. Sad to say. I hope we don't have another one soon. But we know that with climate change, with the various viruses that are out there, that this is likely not the last time we will go through it. I would like us to be prepared for the next one so that there's not so much suffering, there's not so much death, and that we're ready. We're ready to support one another.
Well, that's why you're working on the path forward. Again, that's the white paper. So great to get a chance to talk with you, New York City's First Lady, Chirlane McCray. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jen.